Thank you to Chief Mapachee-Salt, Chief Kistabish, Dr. Bosum, for being with us today. Chief Mapachee-Salt, I believe you gave a really insightful presentation, and you set the stage for the discussion we're going to have today. And so, starting up, we're fortunate to have a prominent figure in Cree leadership with Dr. Abel Bosum, former Grand Chief of the Grand Council of the Crees, and one of the key architects behind the creation of Ujibougumu. Ujibougumu is a Cree community that is known internationally for their innovative approach to territorial, cultural, and sustainable development. His experience is rooted in lived reality, and so this gives him knowledge to share with us insights on the challenges, but also the opportunities behind the creation of a new community. So, Dr. Bosum, in your view, what does it take for a community to turn a collective dream into a real, vibrant, and livable territory, despite all the challenges that come with it?
Am I on? Nice to be here. First of all, I want to thank Chief Chantal Kistabish and Chief Annie Mapachee, for being part of this panel here. I also want to acknowledge and thank former Grand Chief Ted Moses, all right, who I was under his leadership for many, many years. During the time when we were working on Ujibougumu, and then also as his chief negotiator during the Paix de Brave. I also just want to acknowledge the member of the National Assembly for this region, Suzanne Blais. I'm sure we'll be talking to you more about this project as we go along. But just to respond to that question, Ujibougumu was in many ways very similar to what Washaw Sibi is going through. We were also considered squatters on our homeland in the area of, if you look at the municipalities in Chibougumu, Cheffe, and we were actually registered on another community named Mistissini, and that was done back in 1950, and it was done by the federal government as a way of administering native communities, and but also sadly, I have to say, it was a way to make path for resource development. And that's really a sad story, so a sad history of Canada in a way. And of course the provinces, once they had jurisdiction over natural resources, then their laws became also, part of that, the pushing people aside or doing things administratively to keep the Indians away, and so I want to start off with that because that we have to talk about the truth of what happened if we want to go forward. And so we spent many years, in the case of Ujibougumu, we had to justify, first of all, that we were a separate community apart from Mistissini. Then we also had to justify that we had a land base before the James Bay Northern Quebec Agreement. And then, we had to justify that, that the area that we lived in was our home. And then, of course, we had to argue to be incorporated into the James Bay Northern Quebec Agreement, with a land base similar to the other Cree communities. And that took a long time to do. It's a lot of work, a lot of lobbying, and trying to get your story out. So you heard Chief Annie Mapachee's story about her people. And I can relate to that story. When you look at most of the Cree communities along the coast, every community is at the mouth of the source of a river. You look at Wabmextu Sibi, Sibi River, East Main, Wemenji, Waskaganish. Okay, Washaw Sibi was at the mouth of the Hurricane River, just below. And things happened in the past for various reasons that where the people were displaced. And the same thing with Ujie was displaced. So you have a community here of people who were displaced and for so many years, and we look back, that's many years that nothing has been done. And so getting that story out is always the first thing to do. That's the challenge, is getting people to, know the history, the real history from the people side, from the indigenous side. Because yes, we read about stories that were written by journalists and so forth, but often they don't necessarily hold they don't necessarily bring out the real story. And so going forward with Washaw Sibi, the challenge is, for that story to get out and for people to start accepting a fact and be willing to do something about it. And that's where reconciliation really comes around. Reconciliation is about trying to change our past so that we can leave it behind and move forward in a different way. And so, you ask, and people may say, well, why now? And again here, for a community to do that, there has to be a purpose. What's that purpose? And you heard Chief Annie say it's about coming home. And that is true. It's about coming home. It's about finding your rightful place. And so this is something that has been picked up by the young generation. Since I've worked with them, I hear the young people say, yes, we want a community. So, and when you talk to the elders, of course they're supportive. Most of them, as Chief Annie has told you, have passed on. And they've never had a chance to be home. But we do have a chance. They do. The young generation have a chance. And we today have an opportunity to make that happen. And so that's, and I think the biggest challenge is going to be getting the political will to do it. We live in a system of politics, everything from our communities, to municipalities, to regions, to provinces, and country. And so in that system there, politicians change. And even senior administrators in governments change. And so, it takes time, I guess, for people to understand and to accept the story of a group, in this case, Washaw Sibi. And their story is I would say there are many other First Nations indigenous groups in Canada that have the same story, who have been displaced for various reasons. Now, getting the political support and is certainly one way of advancing that file. And the political support has to come from many facets of life. It has to come from their own community, neighboring communities, even in their own nation, the Cree Nation, the Algonquin Nation, the region, Matagami, Abitibi, and Quebec. And so getting that political support comes through discussions like these conferences, learning about the people. You know, we heard this morning about, I think Ms. Otterize talk about visiting her community, so you can actually meet the entrepreneurs. Well, it's the same idea, you know. As much as we know or we think we know each other, most of the time we don't. We know where we come from, we know the towns, and we engage in different activities, but we really still don't know each other. And that is something that I think what needs to be done. And that's exactly what we had to do with UJ. You know, we had to bring the town of Chibougamau, the region, to sit down with us. And even though they knew we lived on the highway, they didn't really know who we were and why we were asking for a community. You know, so it's telling that story over and over again. Now, governments will always ask, well, what's in it for me? What's in it for the government? You know, because at the end of the day, they'll be asked to make decisions, everything from whether they go forward with the project, and if they do, okay, what area is that project going to be, what impact is that going to be in that region, and obviously who's going to pay, or how is it going to be paid. You know, so these are all kinds of questions that the governments ask. Now, in UJ's case, of course, we had to prove and justify that having a community is good for the towns of Chibougamau. I mean, they were operating on, they were, mining activities and forestry activities. Those mines gradually shut down. And then what? You know, the economy lost its pace. And it was the communities around in the region, the communities of Metagami, Mistisni, Wasanapi, Uje, Nemiska, that kept those municipalities alive. And that's the same thing we can see right here. You know, you're looking for a win-win situation. And we think that, you know, having a community next to a municipality can be a win-win situation. And so, you know, when the government asks what's in it for us, well, yes, maybe Washaw Sibi is not a gold mine or a lithium mine, but the difference between these two is that one resource is eventually going to disappear, but the other resource is going to live on. A community is going to last longer and survive longer and populate and contribute to the region stronger than a resource, than just a mine. So so the idea of having a community, building a community, is something that can contribute to the viability of the region. And so now we're here, you're the business people. You're the people that stimulate the economy. You generate wealth in your communities and your regions. And your voice counts. Your voice is very strong. And I think this is, that's what we had to do. We had to go to the Chamber of Commerce in Chibougamau and get their support. When most of that was done, then it was easier for the leaders at that day, the politicians at that day, to make a decision to go forward. So, I can't really determine how long it's going to take, for Washaw Sibi, but we do have an example of what can be done, and we can learn from that example. And so my role in here, my role with Washaw Sibi obviously is to facilitate that process. Hopefully that we will get to a table to negotiate with, with the Cree and Canada to make it happen. Okay?
Thank you, Dr. Bosum. For the next part of the discussion, we're going to speak French a little bit, but there are headphones on your seats, and you can switch between French and English with number 1 and 3 if needed. Donc, nous sommes chanceux d'avoir avec nous Madame Chantal Kistabish, chef au Conseil de la Première Nation Abitibiwinni, Picogan. Chef Kistabish, l'histoire de Washaw Sibi et puis celle de votre communauté se croisent. Il existe des liens familiaux, des alliances, des réalités qui sont partagées sur le territoire. J'aimerais que vous puissiez nous parliez des liens qui unissent votre communauté et puis celle de Washaw Sibi, et puis aussi que vous développiez sur la façon dont votre communauté peut épauler Washaw Sibi dans l'établissement de leur nouvelle communauté.
Ce que je pourrais dire concernant l'histoire de notre relation avec la communauté de Washaw Sibi, c'est que ça date de plusieurs chefs, beaucoup plus avant moi. Par contre, historiquement, je suis au courant un petit peu de comment ça s'est fait. J'entends parler de Washaw Sibi depuis mon jeune adulte à peu près. Tout ça. C'est des gens qu'on a côtoyés tout le temps dans la communauté. Chief Annie, quand j'étais enfant, elle demeurait à 3 maisons de chez nous. Tout ça, fait qu'on se côtoyait déjà. Son père, c'est le frère de ma grand-mère. Quand on parle de liens familiaux entre Picogan et Washaw Sibi, c'est de ça qu'on parle. C'est des gens qu'on a côtoyés dans notre enfance. C'est des gens avec qui on a fait l'école, tout ça. Fait que c'est puis aussi des gens qui se sont mariés. Il y a eu des mariages mixtes de Cree à Anishinaabe. Fait que c'est un peu comme ça où est-ce qu'on parle d'une histoire où est-ce que, oui, il y a une question de territoire, mais aussi de lien, de sang. On peut parler aussi de déchirement aussi, de familles qui ont grandi chez nous, mais qu'en même temps, qui ont conscience que c'est pas la maison. C'est pas la maison. Dans l'histoire, ils viennent d'un autre territoire. On a vu la carte qui projetait pour s'installer tout près de la ville de Matagami. Mais dans mon histoire familiale, mon père a grandi près de Matagami. C'est là où est-ce qu'on voit un partage de territoire depuis plusieurs générations. Tout ça. Puis aussi au niveau des besoins de nos 2 communautés respectives. Chez nous, on parle Anishinaabe. Fait que nécessairement, à l'école, on va enseigner l'Anishinaabe, alors que les familles Cree de la communauté n'ont pas nécessairement l'apprentissage de leur langue Cree à notre école. Fait que c'est pour ça qu'on peut comprendre un besoin d'avoir une autodétermination de leurs besoins à eux, pour leur service aussi, pour la communauté, l'enseignement de leur langue, l'enseignement de leur culture. On sait que les Cree aussi sont habitués au goose break. Nous, on n'a pas nécessairement la même... on n'accorde pas nécessairement la même importance à l'arrivée des outardes. On a différentes différences comme ça dans nos pratiques d'activités traditionnelles. Nous, c'est l'orignal qu'on a ici. Chez les Cree, c'est le caribou. C'est pas la même chose. Je peux comprendre vraiment comment ils veulent procéder. Puis on peut juste, en tant que Première Nation, on peut juste comprendre leurs besoins puis essayer de collaborer pour que ça s'installe le plus facilement possible.
Merci, chef Kistabish. Chief Mapachee-Salt, in light of what you've heard today and the historical links that have been mentioned, how does Washaw Sibi community envision the creation of a place that live to fosters pride and inclusion for your members? And what needs to be expressed by the community and how their voices are guiding every step of this process.
Thank you, Eric. Well, I've been reviewing my notes since 4 o'clock in the morning. So I don't know how many times I retract. So anyway, I woke up Lac Shikobi. Lac Shikobi is a place where my ancestral grounds, I could say also, the Mapachee, my Mapachee side, resided there when they were young. My dad was born at the west side of the lake, and he's buried there too, along with grandmothers, grandparents, great-grandmothers, uncles. Like, I am part of Anishinaabe. I really enjoyed being there. So this morning I was walking through the woods because my husband couldn't drive me with his boat. He got sick, he had a fever, so I told him, just rest, I'm gonna walk. So I walked 1 kilometer to my vehicle. And I was walking, I realized how similar, you know. You go up a hill, down a hill, creek, and that's how life is. You're being challenged all the time. And that's how I feel about Washaw Sibi. We've encountered many challenges, many obstacles, but there's always a way around to get to your destination. So there are many things to consider when we talk about our vision, like the cultural identity, the heritage, the traditions and practices of our people, the respect and values that we are taught. My parents always taught about respecting each other. Algonquin, Crees, non-natives, there was always a respect towards people. So also about the land. Sharing the land was one of the biggest teachings of my dad. He was a hunter, he was a trapper year-round, and he taught us that. There was 8 children. I'm the oldest girl. I have 6 brothers, 1 sister. But he taught us about the land, and we love the land, and I'm teaching that to my children now. So community engagement, understanding their needs, that's one way that we're doing what we need to do. In hopes of all ages, we consult with the elders and youth, and having their ideas as part of a whole planning as we move, as we progress, always taking into consideration their needs, and that decision reflects their voices.
Thank you. For the next questions are going to be for the 3 of you, so feel free to jump in at any time, either in French or English. But I would like to know that, well, in your opinion, what does the establishment of Washaw Sibi represent for northern Quebec and for other indigenous nations seeking to reclaim their own land and home base? How might this project influence or inspire similar projects elsewhere?
All right. Okay. I believe it will have a very positive impact, especially the location that was chosen by our majority. Our people had chose the site near Matagami. It's a location that is the gateway to the north and south. I only foresee a positive economic growth and development for businesses, opportunities and development for all non-natives and natives alike, our neighbors, the Algonquins and the whites. I believe it's a very it's a win-win situation for everyone that would consider Matagami. So I don't think anything negative about it. I do see a lot of opportunities. I imagine that the indigenous nations that have the similar perspective in preserving their language, their traditions and cultures as we do as Washaw Sibi people. We are First Nations people and have the right to have a home where we feel like where we belong.
Dr. Dr. Bosum, you also spoke about a win-win situation. Can you develop on that, on how the development of a new community can be a win-win solution for companies, businesses, governments, and people from the community also?
Well, I can see that if you have a home and you can leave your home and to go out and work, and you have a home to go back to at the end of the day, right? And that's a good feeling for every family. And with the opportunity that's there to build a new community, we're not just building. It's not just buildings and infrastructure and so forth. It's really building a community. It's a neighboring community, between the Cree and Matagami. And it's also a neighboring community in the sense that you have a Cree community just a few kilometers up from an Algonquin community, which is another form of neighboring. And then of course we have all the municipalities in the region and so forth, and we all have the same objective, to build our communities, to be safe, to have a good economy, and if we work together, I'm not going to say if, but once we work together. We can do great stuff in the region. There is a threat, and sometimes a threat is what motivates us. And maybe some people may think that a new community is a threat. That should not be, There's a greater threat from down south. And many of you know what I'm talking about. We have a president in the States that looks to Canada, that looks to the north, and what do they see? They see an empty land with a lot of resources. That's what they see. We together could stand up and work together and stand against this threat. And that's what's going to make us, closer, understand each other, and prosper together. So that's what I see in having another community there. And I don't know how many others there will be, but there's an opportunity, to do something together.
Thank you. Cheffe Kistabish, la perspective est peut-être différente pour une personne qui vit à Picogan, parce que le développement d'une nouvelle communauté, ça peut vouloir dire des amis, des membres de la famille qui vont vivre plus loin de Picogan, donc qui vont se déplacer. Pourriez-vous nous donner votre sentiment personnel par rapport à ça, parce que ça représente aussi un impact pour les gens qui sont à Picogan puis qui vont voir partir certains de leurs proches vers une nouvelle communauté?
C'est certain que c'est un peu comme que je dis d'entrée de jeu, c'est que c'est une question de déchirure aussi, de liens familiaux. Si on ne choisit pas qui qu'on va avoir dans notre vie, si on ne choisit pas quels gens qu'on va côtoyer, ils font partie de nous depuis plusieurs générations, tout ça. Mais en même temps, en étant une communauté semi-urbaine à 4 km d'une ville, on a accès à différents services, tout ça. Fait que souvent, c'est les gens qui demeurent avec nous, c'est un peu là aussi qu'ils vont devoir quitter un peu les familles, quitter un peu une ville qui est à proximité aussi. C'est aussi un changement qui va être fait dans leur vie à eux aussi. C'est aussi, ça peut être très difficile à vivre de devoir, oui, de vouloir s'autodéterminer puis de se proclamer nation, mais de devoir aussi pas le faire que pour soi, mais le faire pour une nation complète aussi. C'est ça. C'est comme ça comme moi je le vois.
Merci. For the next question, it's also for the three of you. I suggest we might start with Dr. Bosum, because it's about the lessons learned from the process of creating a new community. I saw that the Ujibwe process of creating that community, it took 3 years or so, formally between 1989 and 1992, if I get it right. So what are the lessons learned on the things that need to be improved in the discussions with, for example, with the government to make that a smoother process of creating a new community?
It takes a real leader, a real leader who is ready to make a decision. You know, and you know, I tell this story. Even though he wasn't the premier at the time. But when we started talking about Ujie, and so I wrote a letter to Canada, to Minister of Indian Affairs, who was John Munro at the time. And, you know, we made our petition. We said we want to be a community, we want recognition, we want to be incorporated in the James Bay Agreement, and so forth. He sends me back a letter and says, well, if you can secure a land from Quebec, then we'll sit down and talk. So you see the politics there. He had the ball, he threw the ball on the other side. And then an event happened in Saguenay, and there was a big gathering, and Grand Chief Ted Moses, was our Grand Chief at the time. And we said, well, why don't we go? Let's go check it out. Premier René Lévesque is there. And of course, you know, everybody thought, wow, you know, what chance do we have with Mr. Lévesque? You know, because everybody they knew that Lévesque wanted to separate from Canada and so forth, and you know, and he was a hardliner, a real hardliner. Anyway, we went, and we managed to get an audience in the midst of all the public gathering. We managed to get an audience with Premier René Lévesque. And so I told him my story. I said, there's a condition. Canada will only recognize us unless you give us a community or a land base. And he's puffing away. And then he tells me, he says, we're going to fix them. Just wait. 2 weeks later, I get a letter from the Premier. He says, okay, Quebec's ready to set aside 1 square kilometer of land. So I take that back to my people, and I said, well, it's almost like an insult, I said, you know. I mean, this whole area is our territory, and they're offering us 1 square kilometer. But then one elder got up and he said, take it. You know, the other government made a condition if we could secure the land. We have 1 square kilometer. We met that condition. And so we took that 1 square kilometer. It created the table to negotiate. And then eventually, of course, we ended up through negotiation expanding that. And when I say a real leader, he was a real leader. René Lévesque was a real leader. You know, even though his policies and so forth were against creating more federal lands, he was smart enough to accept it. And that's what opened up, you know, the opportunity. That forced Canada to the table. You know, and so that's a lesson learned. And so that's why I say it takes real leaders. And real leaders are not just politicians. Real leaders are everyone that, you know, has a stake in the territory, and everyone that I can make a contribution, to a good cause.
Thank you. Chief Mapachee-Salt, you're a leader, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on the challenges when negotiating with governments. We've heard how things went for Dr. Bosum a few decades ago for Ujebogumuu, and what about today? What are the main challenges you're facing, and what are the things that should change to make it a smoother process?
Well, for me, I think one would be to understand and respect the indigenous culture, histories, and our perspectives. As I did today, I shared our history, and I think many times when I've had meetings that we were assumed to be Waskaganish or Waswanipi or other Cree communities. Yes, I'm a member of Abitibiwinni from the time I was young, but I've seen a lot to say that myself, I chose because my husband is from Waskaganish, and I think of my children eventually who will need to be finding a home and to live in that environment. It's kind of difficult at times to say who's going to move from Picogan, but I believe the majority of our members live outside of Picogan. There's one family I've seen, my uncle, who had 8 children, and those children now have great-grandchildren. And only one member of that family lives in Picogan, and the rest are outside in other Cree communities. So the other thing would be to build on trust and relationships, to always involve indigenous communities on project planning, and it'll bring people together and have equal participation in these projects. And also to address the traumas and systemic barriers that impact indigenous communities. We've seen and we've heard a lot of what happens to a Native person in a hospital and other things. Even now, I still encounter some discrimination based on who I am. And I think those need to come down, tear down those walls and build bridges with a non-Native community. Adopting positive ways with our governments, communities, and others can work together, creating a positive environment, changes in development in projects.
Thank you. Chef Kistabish, peut-être sans que ce soit nécessairement sur le développement d'une nouvelle communauté, mais est-ce que vous pourriez commenter sur des éléments prioritaires qui seraient améliorés lorsqu'il y a des négociations, par exemple, entre la communauté de Picogan et puis différents paliers de gouvernement, que ce soit pour des revendications territoriales ou faire valoir les droits des gens de la communauté? Est-ce qu'il y a des points particuliers à améliorer sur lesquels vous pourriez nous informer?
J'ai des notes, moi aussi, ce sera pas long. Ben non, c'est correct. Tiens mon micro. Ben, tantôt, quand je faisais mon discours d'allocution d'ouverture, ben, je parlais de co-construction. Ouais. C'est vraiment de s'asseoir ensemble, puis de réfléchir, puis de prendre le temps de s'écouter. Puis pas seulement s'écouter, entendre ce qu'on dit. C'est ça, c'est 2 choses différentes. C'est ça. Puis aussi, ben, on a de plus en plus de membres de nos Premières Nations qui sont éduqués. On a nos avocats maintenant, on a des médecins, on a des enseignants. Ça peut déranger les gouvernements. On est maintenant capable de comprendre le langage, tout ça, parce qu'on est allé s'éduquer. Ça peut, contrairement à ce qu'ils peuvent penser, avec la loi sur les Indiens, on ne pouvait pas être éduqué, on ne pouvait pas avoir de diplôme universitaire. Mais on a des gens maintenant qui sont diplômés, on a des docteurs, il y en a qui ont des maîtrises, des doctorats, tout ça. Fait que ça peut jouer dans les négociations, dans les différents travaux. Tout ça. Puis aussi, quand on parle de co-construction, il n'est pas juste question de financer la base, c'est de financer les services sociaux, les infrastructures, les logements, l'éducation, les routes aussi. C'est beaucoup de choses qui entrent en ligne de compte. Il faut vraiment voir ça d'une façon holistique.
Merci. Puis c'est quelque chose qui va s'appliquer aussi à une nouvelle communauté. So we still have a few minutes. So the next question, it's not on the script. But the idea is not to blindside anyone. But I would have a question, because there's a lot of business people in here. So I'm curious for the three of you, how do you think businesses and companies can help through the creation of a new community like Washaw Sibi? Maybe during the creation of Ujibogumu, some companies or businesses stepped up and helped in the process. So I would like to have your advice on that.
Oui. Chez nous, on a des entreprises qui ont au niveau qui travaillent beaucoup avec les mines. On a des entrepreneurs qui ont des entreprises pour construire des routes. Ils ont la machinerie pour construire des routes. On a une cohorte aussi. On a eu des cohortes en charpenterie, menuiserie pour pouvoir construire des maisons. Fait que si besoin il y a d'aller aider à construire des maisons, parce que chez nous, on n'est pas en construction de maisons, mais on peut prêter, on peut envoyer la main-d'œuvre. Il peut y avoir des prêts de services pour les communautés, pour une communauté qui serait en construction. La même chose pour la construction des routes, l'infrastructure aussi. Ça fait plusieurs années que nous, on a une relation avec les entrepreneurs de la ville, autant pour l'aqueduc, l'électricité, la télécommunication, tout ça. Ça, c'est des relations qu'on a établies à travers les années. Mais c'est facile pour nous de référer, de dire, de travailler ensemble, de dire, chez nous, on a travaillé avec ces gens-là, fait qu'on peut faire bénéficier de nos relations pour aider une nouvelle communauté.
Puis ça revient à l'idée d'une collaboration où tout le monde est gagnant, finalement, parce qu'il y a une opportunité d'affaires, en même temps d'avoir une opportunité de développement pour la nouvelle communauté.
Oui, c'est ça. Puis ce que je voudrais dire aussi, tantôt, ça m'a beaucoup touché quand Annie, Cheffe Annie, disait qu'elle a commencé comme réceptionniste. Elle n'a jamais pensé de devenir chef. Mais moi aussi, mon premier emploi en 97, j'étais réceptionniste. On ne sait jamais où la vie va nous mener. On est assis côte à côte aujourd'hui en tant que femme chef pour notre communauté.
Would you like to comment on the involvement of businesses and companies? Do you have comments you would like to share about that?
I agree with everything she said. For sure, I like hearing what she's saying, and I think collaborating with natives, non-natives, with any businesses that can contribute to building the community would be beneficial for everyone. I wouldn't discriminate anyone for who they are. I think that this is what success means, is working together.
Thank you. Dr. Bosum.
Okay. Part of the process is answering the question of impact. is there a positive impact, a negative impact? And I've advised Washaw Sibi that they ought to do an economic impact study. And I shared that with Alain Coulon, who is here, and who has found it to be a good idea, because it would be a document that would voice the opinion of people in the region. Those who are in support of it, and I think the business community, like I said before, it's got a very strong voice, and it's often not heard. We hear the political voices, and we hear those who are against projects and so forth, the negativity. What we need to hear is a very strong, positive voice. And I'm hoping that once we get this economic impact study going, that you would be part of that, make your voice heard. And I think that would be very, very helpful, and that would, really send a message to the government of what the region expects and hopes for. And I'm really happy that we have our M&A here facing us. I don't want to put you on the spot, but it's certainly, I'm happy that you're here to witness, I guess, the discussion here. And I certainly hope you can convey, the message here to your leader, Mr. Legault, and to other ministers, that are expected, I guess, to have an opinion. And I'm also really happy to know that your young man over here from the region, who is a political attaché to Mr. Lafreniere, is here. So we do have the people, and the years are here, and I guess, what we need to do is just do the next step, which is to voice our support, for Washaw Sibi. Miigwech.
Miigwech. Well, I'd like to thank warmly the three of you for sharing insightful thoughts on the development of that new community, Washaw Sibi. And I hope the discussions we had will inspire people in the room to have thoughts about this process, and maybe thinking on how they can contribute to that important human journey. I'm not exactly sure, Julianne, how we proceed with moving forward to the next part.
Give them all a round of applause. They did a good job, all of them. I've really enjoyed learning today. I feel like I'm sitting at a university class. That's how I feel. I really like hearing what was being said, the progress, the wisdom shared by these panelists. Thank you so much, very much. So we're going to get into the plenary or discussion question period. So at this time, while you're thinking about your questions, maybe there's going to be a few people with a mic. Oh, we need to share one mic. So if you have a question, you can raise your hand. But before we get into that, we want to say a big thank you for the wealth of information that was shared today, the valuable insight that was shared, the struggle, the fight, the push. Thank you, Abel, too, for pushing it. I see you pushing it today, too. So thank you so much for that. I'm sure many of you right now might have some questions on how we can, help the communities to advance in their file. So now is that the perfect time to ask them a question. You can direct to who you want to ask it. So we'll open the floor for questions to our panelists. So if there's somebody that wants to ask a question, you can raise your hand and we'll have someone come to you. Okay, we have one back there.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you very much for this panel. It was really, really interesting. Quick question. What was the response of the the other Cree communities, which I think they have to give a portion of their Category 1 land? I'm just curious to know what's happening.
We did receive 5 communities resolution at their AGA, so we do have 5 square kilometers that we're working with. As for the other 4, well, we're eventually I think they will agree. But yes, with the 4 that we have, it's a good start. So they are very supportive of our vision.
Any other questions? Right here in the front table.
It's in the same line. And just the satellite image that's been shown showed that most of the trees looks like it's been cut before. So how do you êtes-vous en paix avec le fait d'aller sur un terrain qui a déjà été coupé où il n'y a peut-être pas de forêts anciennes? How do you live that? It's been cut before.
You mean the land on that we chose?
Yeah.
Okay,
just
yes.
West
Well,
of Matagami.
for sure, it's going to be costing less because the trees are down now, so we can start. And I do believe trees grow.
They grow back.
I have a question for Dr. Bosum. Today we do have the Secretariat, we have different organization, we have local business development corporation. But when the day you start scratching your head to build Hujibugamu, how is it for you to link up with entrepreneurs or other services outside to actually help you to build Hujibugamu? And I'm pretty sure the challenges were different than today, because today it's easy with the internet and everything. I'm curious to know about how that happened.
In the case of Ujie, once we got the political support from the mayors at the time, both Chibougamau and Cheffe, that allowed us to open doors. And so for me, it was really knocking on doors, knocking on all the businesses that were on the main streets of both towns. I mean, they're not that many, okay? Yeah. So I was able to, meet all of them, and then of course, through the Chamber of Commerce. And once we received a resolution from the Chamber of Commerce, that really sent a very strong message, that the business community was behind the project. It wasn't just the Cree or just the politicians. This was actually a business community, that saw the benefit of a new community. Yeah, but yeah, it's true. We don't have to go door to door. I hope not.
There's actually 2 questions. The first one is for the Chief of Washaw Sibi. What is a projected timeline right now as to when the first shovel would hit the ground?
Well, I still have 2 more years on my mandate. Hopefully, I'll be holding that shovel. But as a timeline, I cannot predict at this time. So it always depends on the steps that we're taking.
Good answer. Dr. Bosum, there was a comment on your behalf about history. Reconciliation also starts with history. And that's one thing that I've been looking at as to what we were taught in school and what actually happened. Now, is there any libraries out there that does provide us I would say the truth as to what happened in the history back in the 1500s, 1600s, 1700s. I know I've been taking personal time to re-educate myself on the history of Canada and what truly happened. When we're talking about economic reconciliation, we should also look at historical reconciliation, because I truly believe that the people of the South are non-natives. We don't have the true picture of what happened. Or there are some people who are out there like myself who are educating themselves into what happened in the past and how we need to make the appropriate reconciliation. So my question to you is there a library out there that does exist?
I'm not sure if there's a library, but I think that there are some documentations that have been produced by anthropologists, anthropologists who have studied the cost of people. And in the case of Washaw Sibi, there was a study carried out by an anthropologist from McGill, right? Which is, which actually points out many of the history of the people themselves. So that's a document that has been produced by this anthropologist. But it's whoever writes the story, right, at that time, and how they saw things. And so, it's difficult to say which, what do you believe in? I think really I think what we have to know is that certainly there was social injustice done on Indigenous people. And we see that in the form of the Indian Act. We see that in the form of the residential schools, And then, of course, now we're seeing, and we've heard a lot of stories about missing children and so forth. So we know, without even having to read. I think we know, and I think it's a question of just saying, okay, that what happened. All right, and now we have a group like Washaw Sibi coming out and saying, well, we want to come home, and I think that the most important thing to think about is really, okay, what do we do? Where do we go from here? Do we just stand by and wait for somebody else to do it, or wait for the government to do it? I believe that we all need to take some initiative, and it could be just a phone call to your M&A or to someone, that's in a position, to influence the direction that, that the community is going to go through.
Is there some more questions? Just raise your hand. If there are no other questions, I want to take this time to really acknowledge the people that have been involved in really advancing these files for communities to, prosper as well and be a part of the economy of this nation. I'm really thankful for all the people that have worked, for the leadership here. So let's just give them all a round of applause for their work as well. So I know that at the time we are half an hour early. We are very good. We should get ourselves an award. Give yourselves a hand of applause for this one too. Thank you. Before I close, something came to mind. Even through all of the negotiations and, advancing the file, talking to politicians and all this process, but sometimes we don't know what really happens sometimes behind the scenes. So I have this story, and I wanted Abel to tell this story. And some of the things that happen sometimes, the realities of us being human, right? So, Abel, if you will, I think you were having a meeting with some politicians, and your ringer goes off. and it. So I just wanted him to share because I heard it from him. I want him to share this story as we enter into our cocktail hour. So go ahead, Abel. He's a very good storyteller as well.
Okay, so the people decided to pitch their tents where they want the community to be. And that's where UJ is built right now. And so we managed to bring the negotiator for Quebec. At the time, it was Minister Savoie. And the federal government sent their negotiator. And so we were in this small cabin. And we were, of course, negotiating, and and it was getting tensed, and we could see, we could see that Mr. Savoie, who was representing Quebec, was really trying to get an agreement, and the federal negotiator was, he wasn't sure, didn't want to give in, and so he was just about ready to walk out on us. And then my phone and it was getting dark. We had started like 2:00 in the afternoon, and then it was getting dark outside, and our youth they had built a big bonfire outside, and they were just waiting, to see the outcome of these negotiations. And then my phone starts ringing, and I was kind of embarrassed that so I opened it, and I accidentally went on a speaker, and these youth were singing,
We will rock you.
anyway, that was their contribution.
They rocked. They rocked. So maybe closing remarks from each chief. Chantal, do you want to share a little bit what you want to share with the people today as a closing remark?
Ça me fait toujours plaisir de participer à des événements comme celui-là parce que c'est un peu comme un transfert de connaissances, un transfert de nos croyances. C'est un peu pour faire de vous des ambassadeurs, pour dire finalement, c'est plaisant, ils sont gentils, ces Autochtones-là. C'est un peu pour... je dis toujours oui à des événements comme celui-là. Je vous souhaite un bon congrès. Je ne pourrais pas être avec vous demain. J'ai un agenda plein. Fait que je vous souhaite une belle fin de congrès. Miigwech.
Merci. Thank you. Chief Annie, you want to have some closing remarks?
I like to be funny. But yeah, I think humor is one of my biggest abilities or skills. I enjoy making people laugh, and I do laugh at myself at times. So this one time I shared at a women's conference in Montreal about, I was in the panel as well, and I shared the fact that this year I'll be 60 years old and still collecting family allowance because my youngest is 17. So yeah, so she's going to be graduating next week. She's in Sec 5. She had to move. We had to move her to Val-d'Or for the English sector because she was having difficulty here in French. And those are one of the things that Washaw Sibi encounters is the language, because many of our young people have difficulty in French. They speak English. They grew up in an English-speaking home or Cree-speaking home. So with that, I'm very pleased to see her graduate, and I do hope that in our community we will be sharing French and English, because we are respectful of the language and the culture of our people. I'm very pleased to be here, and I'm very pleased to be sitting beside my little cousin here. She's her mother is my cousin, my first cousin. So I enjoy being sitting here in the panel with him, with also with Abel. He's a very good mentor, a very good advisor. I'm very pleased. So I'm saying thank you to both of you, and also to everyone here listening. Thank you.
So I don't know if maybe I'm going to pick on Eric. What have you learned during this facilitation here? What stood out the most for you? I know it's a lot.
Well, I've learned a lot. It's for me. I think the thing that makes me think the most is the challenges for the people who are going to be moving from their actual community to a new home somewhere else. I have a lot of admiration for these people, because they're going to face a challenge, but this is going to give a brighter future for future generations. So yes, I think admiration is the word that I'm keeping from this conversation.